Morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of TechShare 22. I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to say that properly. So I hope everyone had an amazing day yesterday that was able to join in. We had an absolutely jam-packed schedule with some amazing panels and individual speakers. And all that culminated in a fantastic in-person event kindly hosted by News UK last night at the Baby Shard. And yeah, really just some fantastic discussions going on. But if you weren't able to make any of them yesterday, don't despair. You can catch up on all the recordings for those of you with community tickets. When you go into the conference area, the hop-in area, if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a replay button, and that will bring up all the sessions from yesterday. The initial session is like a fairly long chunk, but that one contains the intro with Google, HSBC, the Apple session. All of those are in that one session. So do hop in and take a look at those if you missed them yesterday. I'm really excited to be kicking off today with a session on employee resource groups and champions networks. So for anyone who's not aware of employee resource groups, that's one name used for internal networks that support groups within organisations. And increasingly we're seeing organisations with employee resource groups for disability. And we're also going to be talking about that growing global network of accessibility champions working within their organisations to bake accessibility into the way they work and also to promote accessible practices and educate colleagues on how to work in an accessible and inclusive way. So we've got an amazing panel here today. So I'm going to go across to them and we will go around the table and introduce everybody and hear about their work in this area, what they focus on, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the potential crossover between those groups and how they might be able to work and collaborate together to really drive accessibility and inclusion within their organisations. And I've got the lovely Ted from Intuit in the studio with me here today. And coming in online, we have Michael Vermeersch from Microsoft. We've got Helen from Dow Jones. We've got Charlie from the Ministry of Justice. And we've got Melanie from the University of Greenwich. So welcome, everybody. How are you today? All good. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with you, Michael, because you've got a fairly long history within Microsoft of working within employee resource groups. Maybe you can kind of set the scene as to what that looks like in Microsoft and just your general experience in that area.
Fabulous, thank you. So a quick introduction first. So I'm Microsoft's Accessibility Go-to-Market Manager. I'm also the chair then of Microsoft UK's Employee Resource Group for Employees with Disabilities. I'm a white male wearing glasses. My pronouns are he, his, non-conforming. As the Accessibility Go-to-Market Manager, I orchestrate our Accessibility Go-to-Market across business, our business, of course. This includes the growth and readiness of accessibility champions. But then going back to the other role I mentioned there as chair of the Employee Resource Group, I think in the UK, this started in roughly 2015, where we had this growing interest and initiatives around diversity and inclusion. And it was kind of emerging and, you know, all kinds of trial thingy-bops. That's a technical word for you. And this is where I got invited to start this off. Now, what I had seen, I mean, here you are, you get kind of voluntold to do this, and there's no education and background and all of that kind of stuff in this. But what I did know is what I didn't want to do. And I tell you one example. We were in those days like, oh, let's all put on a blindfold and try to brush our teeth. It's like, that's definitely not something I want to do as an employee resource group for employees with disabilities. So very rapidly, before I would get all these inspirational thingies to do, I kind of said like, right, we need to create a vision and a strategy. And that was around 4 pillars as a growing empowered communities. So people could have a voice and people felt that they were listened to, and then ultimately things would change for the better, of course. The other pillar was creating an inclusive work environment. So that's physical, but also processes, that kind of stuff. Frontier for innovation was another pillar, and that is because at the end of the day, we're a tech company, and there was such a discussion continuously about the business case of diversity and inclusion. What's the business case? And there will be business benefit. So I very rapidly felt that as an employee resource group, we needed to connect to our business, which is we were going to create a frontier for innovation. The fourth pillar, final pillar, possibly, definitely not less important, grow awareness. We had to have a marketing and communication engine behind us because people otherwise wouldn't know, and this was really key to continuously be in the face of our leaders, connect with our leaders, connect with our newsletters, so people would actually know that things were happening or we wanted things to change, etc. Now, this itself has been a journey. I mentioned 2015. That took the company through our steps of disability confidence, which is a UK scheme focused on hiring and retention of disabled employees, ultimately then also growth and empowerment. We got to that journey ultimately to leadership status in 2019, and we recently renewed that leadership status in 2022 in March. So that was kind of shows you that journey. It is a journey. It takes time. But what we saw internally is, and I'll get back to the champion bit, is that this led to more talent, more employee satisfaction, and overall we saw that even not with our disabled employees, people felt more proud to work for an organization doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that heightens the proudness and the productivity. We saw that. Now, as this grew, I also saw with our employee resource group that this almost became part of our brand. We got involved with, hey, can you tell this customer on how to do this? And this was then leading more and more to a culture where actually our employees felt that they had a voice on this, they would get listened to, and actually they could start to give input to our products and services, saying, for example, you know what, this actually doesn't work for me, it needs to change, both on the level of our products and services. From a Champs perspective, we, roughly the same time, but in 2016, we got our Chief Accessibility Officer, Jenny Leigh-Fleury, which you will also see or have seen throughout the conference already. That was 2016. And then with that, we started to grow the commercial and strategic focus on accessibility to bridge the disability divide. In 2018, so again, that took time, we got to a more orchestrated approach to accessibility in the UK and the rest of the globe. And this is where we could say there was overlap. And there were discussions on this. And then again, that has been a journey of maturity. The summary of this is, and then I'll completely shut up. The summary of this is that we said like, okay, there is overlap, but this is the focus for the ERG: culture, systems and processes, and an input to product readiness. Mind you, this is not our day job, but we will give you input and we should get listened to because this is how it affects us. There you are. From a CHAM perspective, the overlap is the product readiness. obviously, because that's what they would be pushing and talking about, but with the confidence and the information on lived experience of people with disabilities. And we had that kind of moments where, you know, they kind of say, oh, there's this person there with a tremor. Possibly this technology could help. It's like, no. That person possibly could have gone through a journey of rehabilitation, and actually is quite happy where they are now. If they haven't asked for help, they shouldn't get help. Thank you very much. A little example like that. The other responsibility also for the champs would then be business growth, obviously, because that is connected to the products and the capability of the products. Employee resource group, totally not accountable for that. So that's the bit where the difference is. And that's me.
Thanks, Michael. And it's really, I love the, you know, the likening it to a journey, that these things, a lot of the time people in organisations think we need to address this and we need to do it quickly, and they run at it, and it can be a bit of a damp squib, if you like. It doesn't go according to plan. And actually stepping back, and what you were saying, Michael, about having a vision and a strategy and working together to determine those pillars, makes it really clear and really easy for people engaging in either network to know what their role is, to know when what the expectations are, what the opportunities are, but also to be able to point to something and say, actually, I haven't got time for that, or whatever it might be. But it sounds like it really is clear. And also, it was really exciting to hear about the working towards disability confident leader alongside. So was that driven from the inside of the ERG, that programme?
Yeah, absolutely. That was completely driven from the employee resource group, which is exactly as I feel it should be.
Yeah.
But then where we then have collaborated with the accessibility champions is, this is the story, this is how it grew, this is why this matters.
Yeah.
So we kind of then created that collateral for them to retell that story, but definitely not you tell our story. No. This is our journey, our story. By all means, you know, tell that story, tell how this changed us, tell us where technology had some impact, had some both impact or has changed because of this. Or in our processes, for example, one of the key changes that we had in this audit, key improvements, is that we now have clear representation in our hiring processes. So you will see disability on our hiring sites, whereas before you wouldn't necessarily see. So again, and that is done via the input of the employee resource group, but telling that story and creating that notion with the champs was so key, because we need to see, you need to do things with and by people for disabilities, not for people with disabilities.
Most definitely. Thank you so much. Right, shall we go over to Helen at Dow Jones? It would be really great to hear your perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, thank you for having me. Apologies, it's quite dark here. I'm travelling for work and it's 5 a.m. in the morning.
It's fine. So it's mood lighting. It's making me feel relaxed.
Yeah. So it's great to be here. I'm Helen Hewitt and I am the head of design operations for the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones. And we have accessibility as part of my team at the moment. So at Dow Jones, we call our internal, it's an IRG, internal resource group. It's called Discover at DJ. And then we launched our version of a Champions Network, which we call the Accessibility Working Group. We launched that about a year and a half ago. So, and that was the first initiative I launched when I took on responsibility for accessibility. And both of these teams work really, really well together. So, you know, from the get-go, they've work very closely. Our IRG group focuses on the employee experience, so making sure that the accessibility is top of mind for every single employee across Dow Jones, and we have 80 offices globally, so it's kind of like Microsoft. Yeah, so it's a big spread. And then with our accessibility working group, our main focus there is on really making sure that our digital products are as accessible as possible. So the two teams do work very, very closely together and actually co-deliver quite a lot of initiatives together. So they've launched things like, we now have an accessibility statement on all of our consumer products, and we're working through that on our B2B range of products. That's coming soon. They also co-host meetups. So every quarter we do a kind of a meetup for all of our staff globally, just to share everything that the company's doing, and give people a platform to share and talk together. And we actually had, I know Michael mentioned Jenny Lay-Fleury starting with you, and she actually came and spoke at our last meetup, which was really fantastic. So it was great to have her join us. So the two teams work really closely together, and I would say actually starting our accessibility working group gave the IRG team, the Discover at DJ team, a real lease of life. It felt like it really kind of re-energized them and their purpose. And one of the main reasons that we've seen that kind of good synergy and also them being able to support each other so well is that they have the same executive sponsor. So I don't think that happened on purpose. I think it was just a kind of very lucky coincidence, to be honest. But I think having that executive that cares so deeply about both of them really forced us to be aligned and to work together and to share information together. And that's why I think we've seen such a lot of success. So as I mentioned, we co-deliver different initiatives. So we're planning now a whole roadmap of things that they can co-deliver together. One of the really big achievements that I think they've had from working together is that Dow Jones announced 6 months ago that it would now be accessibility first for all new products that we built going forward. So now accessibility is baked into all of our products. And we've fully audited all of our existing products, and retrospectively we'll be bringing them to the place where we want them to be. But going forwards, it's absolutely baked into everything that we do. So I think that's been that's kind of created that opportunity where the two teams need each other. They're very now codependent on each other to achieve these goals. So yeah, I think that would be probably my best advice really for anybody that's kind of maybe newer to this journey or considering how to make it work, is to really think about that executive sponsor, that voice at the table that's really driving the message and spotting the opportunities on the horizon, for the teams to then be able to come together and collaborate on.
It's that amazing combination of all the people with all the insights and viewpoints and skills, but being heard by that one executive sponsor who then just takes it forward and removes the barriers. And, and again, I think for the people involved in the groups, when you get a change like you saw where accessibility first, this is our absolute commitment now for every new product, is such a source of pride for people as well, isn't it, within the organisation, because they know that they achieved that with the messaging and collaboration that they put forward. And I love the idea of the co-hosted meetups, because it's that sharing of experiences, successes, challenges, just drives things forwards, doesn't it? Thank
Absolutely.
you, Helen. That's fantastic to hear, and congratulations on what you've been achieving there. Melanie, I know we've got lots of HE people in the audience at TechShare, and Melanie is from Greenwich University. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself, Melanie, and just tell us a little bit about what you do at Greenwich, but also your work in the National Association of Staff Networks. Is that right? Disabled Staff Networks.
Yes. Obviously, I'm going to say a bit more than that. Yeah, NASDAN. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. I've had to leave myself some notes. because I am known for tangents and not actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So if I'm
That's why we love
looking
you.
at it, but yeah, not when it's timed, and I am sharing a platform with some very esteemed people. So yes, I'm Melanie. I work at the University of Greenwich in the UK, and I manage something called START, which is START. It's got 2 A's in it. You can Google it for a commission to myself, and I'm a disability practitioner, really, but I also do outreach work, and a large part of my job is I actually work with disabled students as specialist student ambassadors. I've got loads and loads of different bits of my jobs, but because we've got quite a tight schedule and everything, I'm just going to focus on the ERG, DSN, DSE, whatever people acronym. So at my university, we have the disabled staff community. This was up for discussion a little while ago. And again, Google again, might need some wine after this. The difference, I didn't know, I just knew that I prefer the word community to network. But these sort of definitions, if you like. So networks are really about finding resources, which is in evidence today with terminology, and it tends to be open to more of a sort of like free range membership. If you think about LinkedIn or something, that would be a network. Community, which is basically what we do, it's mutually supportive, which is very important. There's a shared purpose as well. What I've found I'm an executive officer within our disabled staff community. It is super supportive, and because it's non-judgmental, and we have found that quite often people have actually come to us before actually sharing their disability or whatever with HR. It's like almost like a stepping stone to like thing it. And quite often, a lot of our members are hesitant to start off with because they don't want that label disabled. But after they've been with us for a while, they're sort of like embracing it. With START has got a number of mantras, but our biggest mantra is experts by experience.
Yeah.
And it's a bit similar to what Michael was saying earlier. You know, don't make assumptions. Do stuff with us, not for us. And I'm delighted because I'm surrounded by grown-ups on this situation, I'm also an executive officer for the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks. And we have a delightful Vice-Chancellor called Professor Jane Harrington. And she's been with us nearly 3 years. From the onset, she was very focused on including our disabled staff and our disabled students, and especially around mental health. So we have got as senior a champion as possible. She's, she drives a lot of stuff as well. One of the when I was invited to do this, I said yes, without knowing what I was doing, because I'm not very sensible. And I don't know if it's because I'm in the UK, but I wasn't familiar with the term ERG. So I might have used another search engine and to see what it was. And it came up, obviously, as we know, as this employee resource group. Now, my hackles went up immediately. I'm quite a reactive person. Because how I read that was organisations using their staff as a resource, not we will provide resources for you.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, don't do that, because I'm a bit, I can't think of the word, so I'll admit it. So my hackles immediately went up. And one of the reasons is because of the nature of my job, and my email and everything is is out there in the ether, I probably get 2 or 3 emails a week from researchers saying, oh, you work with disabled students, can I do my survey? No, they won't. And we've actually we've got an etiquette agreement for our members, and it's actually in there that if you are not an active member, do not ask, because some people here will be aware of research fatigue, and disabled people are an excellent target because, you know, oh, we can get some funding. We'll go and find some people in some wheelchairs and with guide dogs. The other thing that I was just going to say, because obviously I can't talk for about 3 weeks, being in NASDAN, the National Association, not necessarily for myself, because I have a superb network full stop of, you know, friends and stuff like that. Some of my colleagues in different universities, sometimes it's quite harrowing to see what's going on elsewhere. So from my perspective, we know, because of our VC and our values and everything else, I'm in a very lucky position compared to a lot of my colleagues. And then last thing I'm going to do, this might exemplify how our VC is about disability and stuff like that. So I've been doing this job for 15 years. I do love my job. We have created, so myself, disabled students, disabled staff, disabled alumni, we have created what is a bit like a Diet Coke version of a model of disability. And it's a very affirmative set of principles.
I saw it.
It's going live on the 2nd of December. We would have done it on the 3rd of December for the United Nations Day of Disability. Inconveniently, it's on a Saturday, which I thought was rude. So we're doing it on a Friday. And actually, other people can attend remotely because we've set up a Zoom thing. But basically, these principles are about, it's like an awareness raising tool, but it's also something that our disabled staff and students can take ownership of. And it's one of the things in there actually says disabled peers are, you know, often our best cheerleaders. So it's called the SPOD, which is, I didn't really think about that when I did it. But sorry, I didn't say, my university is adopting it university-wide across all of our campuses. For now, we also do transnational education. We've got universities across the world, and we're going to implement it into our others. But also, what I've done is I've attached a Creative Commons license to it. So if other organisations, charities, whatever, want to adopt them, they can have them free of charge.
Fantastic. And we will share all the details of your launch session and so on. And it's just an enormous achievement to have that model of disability that's been, you know, built by your staff, your students, and then going out there across the globe as well to all of your campuses, and then obviously something that you can share through the national network as well, like you say, to be adopted beyond. So thank you so much, Melanie.
Sorry, Amy, I know, because I'm not supposed to talk too much. I did forget to say, the chair of NASDAN, Dr. Hamid Haroon, search engine him, he's actually doing the staff keynote at the physical launch.
Oh, fantastic. And also for people on the session today that didn't know about the national network, we'll share details of that because there's a huge amount of members and it's open to all sectors as well. There's a lot of HE members, but again, networks of networks really do bring that cross-pollination and discussion. And that's a brilliant segue, actually, over to Charlie. Charlie Turrell, previously of the BBC and now of the Ministry of Justice.
I know, right? I get around.
You really do. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good, yeah, and thank you very much for having me. I know it was a bit of a, I had a lovely, delightful tech problems this morning, so I was rushing around, but it's been really nice to listen to all the amazing other stuff that people are doing, and I can't wait to watch it back because I'm thinking I've got some good ideas in here. I'm going to steal some.
Exactly, be inspired by others.
Absolutely.
So tell us about, because you've spearheaded all sorts of networks and groups, haven't you? I don't know where to start. You choose.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined the fabulous Gareth Ford Williams' team at the BBC, and was lucky enough to look after the Accessibility Champions Network there. So that was a group of around 250 amazing individuals all across the BBC, not just in the product and technology space, which I think is really key for, again, having different kinds of conversations, making sure that you're hearing voices from across all different kinds of roles. So I did that for about 3 years, and in that time, obviously wasn't doing enough work. I decided that it would be really great if we could get people that were doing similar roles to me, or people that were looking at champions networks, and seeing if we could maybe share some information with each other and share resources, and mainly just for a little bit of support as well, because I think quite often your accessibility team in an organisation is really small in comparison to the rest of the organisation, or you might feel like it's only you that seems to be shouting about it. So being able to be a part of a wider group of people that are either having the same successes or the same struggles, to be able to share that, I thought was really kind of key. So I started alongside with Heather Hepburn from Skyscanner, who I think you've already heard from yesterday in the travel and tourism session, and Gareth. We started this network, which now has nearly 500 people in it, which is fabulous, and it's quite active. You can see, do you know what? Genuinely, I absolutely love seeing questions posted on there, and all these people kind of chipping in with the different ideas and going and writing them down, thinking that's a cracking one. I'll try that in my own group. And so it's really lovely to have that network. It's called CAN, and I'm more than happy to kind of post information about that if you want to join, because it is a fabulous group of people. We meet fairly often virtually, and we pick a topic and we share. We do speed networking, which I can come back to. And then from the BBC, I've come over to the Ministry of Justice, and I've joined just an incredible team of people, headed up by Beverly Newham, who is just wonderful. Got quite a lot of funding for our team to be able to kind of create this accessibility team at the MOJ. We're in the really early stages, which is really exciting, because I've gone from quite an established network and established group of people to us all getting together with different roles, responsibilities, different skills, different viewpoints about how to kind of attack things, and really getting stuck into looking what the MOJ needs. So at the minute, I'm doing a bit of groundwork to find out who my people are. And I think a couple of people have mentioned here, and I listened to a stakeholder session yesterday, which was really interesting, talking about your storytelling. So I'm making sure kind of getting as many of those stories as possible, which I think is where the employee resource groups also come in. People are willing to share their stories and want that to go and be a part of what you're doing, then wonderful. You know, if that's something that people find really helpful, then that's great. And also trying to find the people that are key in your organisation to push things forward, because I'm massive about communication. I think, you know, as you can tell, I don't show up, and I'm everywhere. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's great to have all these kind of the different voices. And one of the things I went to a conference last week, and one of the things that me and another chair that was talking about was you forget that we're in an accessibility bubble sometimes.
Yes.
It was a technology conference that I was at, and it was the first time that anyone had heard about alt text, and the first time that anyone had heard about different and you would have thought, but you know, it's, for us, you kind of go, oh yeah, of course. And I'd mentioned alt text, and somebody said, oh, would you mind explaining to the audience what that is? And I thought, yeah, actually, that's a really good point. You know, it was a first opportunity that some of those people in the audience had of really kind of talking about accessibility than more than just wheelchairs and guide dogs, like Melanie was mentioning. So I think it's a lot about making sure that we continue to push that accessibility kind of conversation in different areas that we've not thought about before, because you do really think that everybody knows this stuff, and they don't. So I'm massive about trying to find those people that have never heard about this before, because what a great opportunity we get to have to kind of be the first people to talk about accessibility and to make sure that we do it in the right way as well.
That's so true. And actually, it's interesting when you're recruiting champions, you don't want to be just looking in that bubble, do you? The best champions actually are going to be the people who simply hadn't thought about it. You've talked to them about alt text. They've understood that it's not a technical thing that's over here and only techies know about it. And they then...
Someone else's job.
Tell the person next to them and grow in confidence. Because again, I remember talking to somebody about, you know, setting up a champions network, and they were saying, well, we haven't got, you know, that many experts in the organisation. And it was like, it's not about knowing everything, is it? It's about having a vision, it's about working together, and that... That network thing that you were talking about earlier, where someone throws a question out and everybody piles in with a response, that reminds me of the National Association of Disability Practitioners have a list similar to that. And what it means is that you've got that hive mind that grows together. And again, you know, these days you don't need to have it all up here, do you? You just need to know where to go to find out about it.
Yeah, and that's a really key thing. It's about where to go, who to ask. And that's the key to making these networks work. You know, I am not looking at the MOJ for all the experts. I'm looking for people that are really keen to get involved. I'm not, you know, we've got a wonderful team, an accessibility team, and that resource needs to get out there. It's about, you know, part of my role is communications and stakeholder management, and communications are key. I'm looking for internal networks. We've partnered with MOJ Able, which is the ERG that's here doing a day for, I think, International Day of Person with Disabilities. We're going to do something for there, and my segment isn't talking necessarily about the stories, it's just promoting the team to kind of say, this is what we're doing, these are the skills that we've got. If you're going to ask this question, this is a person to go and speak to. You know, it's just about maybe the lens of accessibility, talk about the social model, talk about something that they might not have heard about before, potentially using your own story. I talk constantly about having ADHD and I can't sit still and all the other different things that come with that, and how I used to utilize that as part of my strength, you know, and but also how it can be really difficult to try and fit into a work not necessarily organized for you, you know. So having those stories and making it quite human is another way of getting people involved. I think that was what we were saying in the stakeholder one yesterday of those stories, and I loved that point. It's not, you know, we're not necessarily looking at, I mean, empathy labs have their own place, absolutely, but it's not necessarily looking at it from that point of view. It's kind of going, oh yeah, you know, this is how I found I was disabled in a meeting, or this is how I felt, you know, that I couldn't be along with everybody else, or why this particular service has taken me 3 times longer than it's taken somebody else. You know, it's having those open conversations and telling the stories about, you know, how we can improve those processes, that user journey for everybody, not just for a specific group of people. So yeah, I think my main job at the minute is trying to find the people to want to have the conversations, and that will also be able to pass that information on to other people. And by, you know, hopefully in 6 months, a year's time, we'll have a big group of people that are all keen. They can all find the information that they need. They're asking better questions, and I don't mean that there's bad questions, just, you know, deep diving on certain things. They've got the baseline knowledge, and they're asking, how can I improve on what I've already done? You know, that's where I want to get to, and hopefully that's what will happen.
Definitely, and I think you're absolutely right, that raising of awareness and the light bulb moments. No one doesn't want to work accessibly, but you have to make it as easy as possible, because people get nervous, they don't, and yeah, that if you can create the desire to do it and make it as straightforward as possible, you've got a fighting chance, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with the CAN network. You know, there's people in there that might have been doing this for ages, and it's just exhausting when you're doing it and you shout it, you're thinking, why is it not working? You know, you can have all the will in the world, and sometimes it's difficult to get senior leaders buy-in, and it's just, might be just there's a different technique. You know, we've met the same kind of people before, or that, you know, and somebody else will have had that problem. And I think that's, you know, it's a supportive group of people, and I think making sure that everyone kind of knows there's nobody in here that's, you know, does everything that's fully accessible. There's nobody that knows all the answers. It's about community knowledge, and that community knowledge spreading in a way that we all feel like we're being on the same journey.
So true. Thank you, Charlie. Ted.
Yes.
Last but definitely not least, tell us about Intuit. You've got all sorts of elements to bring to the discussion today, don't you?
So I've been at Intuit for over 10 years now, and I've got a lot of similar experiences as the rest of the panel. I co-founded our Intuit Abilities Network. That was probably about 8 years ago. I've also been a co-founder of the Indigenous Peoples Network and the Intuit Silver Network, and I've been a big ally for our Intuit African Ancestry Network and our Pride Network. So I have a lot of experience with employee resource groups. I also lead a core team of accessibility. Not too many people talk, maybe Charlie was part of a core team. The core team is fully funded, full-time, working on accessibility. And then we also have a champions program. I think we started around 2018. And so we've evolved consistently. And when we started our accessibility champion program, we also met with Charlie. And I met with some people I know at Google, and Microsoft was actually an inspiration for us. So I've had experience with all the 3 different levels of the ARGs, the champions, and the core teams. Each one has its own responsibilities and purposes, but we all have a common goal. And that common goal is that we create products that are accessible. We create products that allow people to be independent, to run their own business, to control their finances. But we also have a goal that people that come to Intuit find an inclusive workplace where they can do the best work they can. That means that they find that they're respected by managers, that they have opportunities for growth. Any accommodation they need is provided as quickly as possible. That's our goal as a group. But each group also has its own responsibilities. The employee resource groups, keep in mind that they're volunteer driven.
Yeah.
And that's really critical, because in order to have a vibrant employee resource group, you have to have people that have a passion. And you have to have managers that recognize the passion and the importance. And when that person says, I need to take off 20% of my time for this month, that manager recognizes that, and that manager supports them, and it gives them the flexibility they need. But their goal is to work with the employees to make sure that we create an exceptional experience within the company. And that when we're building products, that we're able to use our voice. And we're able to make changes from a personal standpoint. An example might be our work with supporting reduced motion. That comes from someone within Intuit that had a vestibular disability, who was able to work closely with our animation studio so that they could build a platform that produced different animations for each use. One for people that request reduced motion, one for people that's not. Another example is our Indigenous Peoples Network. Coming up into Halloween, they worked with the African Ancestry Network, with the Women's Network, and with the Abilities Network to create a large document about cultural appropriation. Now, that was a really fantastic document that went across the whole company so that people understood what is cultural appropriation, when is it inappropriate, and how can you give respect instead of appropriate. These are some of the things that employee resource groups do. They also are our community advocates. So our resource groups are the ones that work with the nonprofits that do volunteer activities, that do fundraisers, that bring in speakers, so that each location may have its dedication. For instance, in India, they do a lot of work with NGOs that do neurodiversity, and also last week we did a wheelchair building event, where we bought wheelchairs, built them, and then donated them to an organization that then gave them to people. So they're like the hub, they're like the community, they're like the people, the faces. They're the ones that support, and then we have subgroups. Subgroups, for instance, our deaf and hard of hearing subgroup, our ADHD subgroup, our neurodiversity subgroup. They're still part of the Intuit Abilities Network, but they have their own Slack channel so that they can speak privately within the group. Now the champions, the problem with before we had champions is that every time we did a presentation, we would have to talk about what's alt text. We would have to talk about what is accessibility. We'd have to explain that doesn't mean that the doors are locked. It doesn't mean that the databases are down. So we would have to explain what is accessibility. We would then have to go from start to finish, like explaining the basics. And we were doing this over and over and over and over again. And we had no way of tracking, like, who has had basic knowledge of accessibility? Who has set up their computers with automated testing and with keyboard accessibility? And who has made a commitment that they're going to move forward, they're going to make a difference for people with disabilities, or for themselves, or for their products. So the Accessibility Champion Program was a way of creating a common knowledge across Intuit. As of this week, I've got a bunch that I've got to award, but we'll be at 1,400 people have completed our basic level of accessibility. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. It's a low barrier of entry. But these are as people were saying, how do we get it indoctrinated? How do we get it so it's a common knowledge? And then we give 2 other levels which allow people to build their leadership skills, their public speaking skills, their team building skills, learn more about accessibility. What is it like to create closed captioning or audio descriptions, to drive team volunteer events. We want people to become leaders. It gives, we've had a lot of people become level 2 champions that were 2 years out of college, and this was the first opportunity they had for professional development. Because usually you're a junior engineer and you're just focused on learning the development cycle. Yeah. And we're saying, oh, you can learn the development cycle, but you can also become a leader. You can be the person in your team that people look at. We've had great success with that. And then they have a chance to also become a level 3, which is where you're making global changes. We had a champion here in London, and he has helped us. In fact, I think he's online right now. Hi, Ruben. He helped us reimagine what a champion program would be like. And so what we're creating is a panel of leaders. And so instead of just the core team, we actually have a group of people when they become level 3 champions. And we rolled this out, but we're going to be starting to promote people in December and January. They will still have the time to do a little bit of work for accessibility within their normal work mode, but they'll also have opportunities to take extended projects and also to start advising people across the company. And then you have the core team, which we're working full time, but our discussions have changed. In the last few weeks, when we're talking about people asking us questions, they're not about alt text. I've had questions about what is the philosophy for disabled buttons? What is the keyboard interaction for a drop-down menu? These are the kind of, and should a modal allow people to tab into the background page? These are the much more sophisticated questions that are coming now, instead of how do I put alt text on an image? And that's the benefit that we've seen by having these 3 layers, and they all work together. And I just want to say also, it was mentioned before, collaboration across employee resource groups is critical. That's where you get the engagement. That's where you get the fun aspects. That's where you actually see people understanding intersectionality. And it's not just my experience, but I can now understand and empathize with people with different experiences.
That sounds fantastic, and I just love the learning journey element of it, and the milestones and the recognition and the career development, and it's bringing that whole. It brings a structure to it, but also a pride and a value. And when it's unlocking not only fantastic relationship building opportunities and networking, but also real career paths and development activities. And that's a real hallmark of the maturity of that network, that you're getting the tricky questions, not the, here we go again with, you know, more of the same. And I just think that sounds incredible. And I love the cross-working between the employee resource groups, because guess what? Many people will be members of more than one,
right.
and also, you know, yeah, the perspectives, quite often, you know, there can be a creative solution coming from another network to a barrier that's being experienced by somebody else. So I think that all sounds amazing. The time's been flying by. I'm just looking at our countdown. I know we're allowed to run over a little bit on this one, but I must contain myself and try and be organised. I guess it would be really good to have, for anyone who's at the beginning, maybe a couple of people give advice to people who wanted to set up an employee resource group or a disabled staff community or network, and then a couple of people what they would recommend for a champions network. What's the magic ingredients? So I don't know who'd like to volunteer for which.
Charlie.
Charlie?
Because I think it's, I was going to say, because I'm in the really early stages at the MOJ of setting up a network, and so kind of going from looking after one to setting one up, it's a different bag, isn't it, really? And I think it was easier to set up Can because you had so many people that you already knew and that you were chatting to that were all missing path. So I would say the key thing that I've noticed of trying to set up a champions network here is find your people. So go and almost ask to go into meetings, ask to go into sessions that they're doing where they're sharing resources. Or I think I sat in one, a disabled action group the other day, and people were just talking about the work that we've done and use it as an opportunity to go, well, you know, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I think you can get out of the fact that more people will be talking to each other, and this is what I would like from you. Be quite clear on what it is that you're doing. I think there's so many conversations, it seems so overarching and nice to have, and this is an ideal. Okay, what's the first step that they need to do to get involved, to start helping you, give kind of practical guidance. So for me, it was who are your stakeholders? Who are the people that allow you to open some doors? Who are the people that you think that you look up to that you'd be able to pass on to me so I can, you know, give the information to? Where are the key people in your areas that you think they've been asking about accessibility and I think they'd be really interested? You know, they're the people that know. You don't have to do all that looking work yourself. Like, there is people in every single area where you go, they're cracking, they know exactly what they're talking about, or they seem really eager, or they know, you know, they've got some really good resources and maybe outside connections where they're finding these resources. So I think spend a little bit of time getting your groundwork in and making sure that you're having those conversations. The more people are talking about what you do, the more people will even come to you without you looking. So those conversations are starting. And then one of the other things I've done is get all the resources that I've had from the CAN network, from these wonderful people on LinkedIn that post it constantly, where I think, you know, I'm glad I follow you because you're giving me all the information I need. Jake Abner is one who he's absolutely amazing. He posts some really great content, and put it somewhere easy to find for people. So either a content hub, an accessibility hub, you know, if you're building that, put it just somewhere else for the time being. Make it accessible for people to find, and so that they're not digging around. You know, you've got the information, but you're in a bubble. So make sure that you're spreading that information as far as you can.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. And then let's have one person actually looking at the time to give some advice on getting an employee resource group off the ground.
I can suggest one thing. There's a lot of information in Charlie's group, the Champions of Accessibility Network. We're sharing everything. Everybody wants to help everybody else out. So we work with a lot of different companies, but you have to remember that your company is unique, and you need to understand what works for your company. So look at what is your company's mission, how does your company work culturally, and then figure out what's the best version of a champion network, what's the best version of an employee resource group, what's the best version of core teams, meaning there might be more than one. Use all those resources you're finding and then pick and choose parts of those so that you can then establish what works best for you. We've shared a lot of information about our champion program, and a lot of companies have used that, but I've always pushed them to say, don't just take what we did and duplicate it. It's got to be what's best for you.
That's such an important point, actually, because I think one of the biggest barriers that you'll get is taking something and saying, I want to do something like this, and there's a clash of cultures, whereas when you can make it feel, you know, like it chimes with the culture, even if it then goes on to really challenge that culture, you need to come at it from the inside, don't you? I think that's a really, really important point. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this first session today. I think that's given so much great advice and guidance to everybody out there who is, you know, a long time looking at these kinds of things within their organisations, or perhaps coming new to it, or like Charlie, moving on to somewhere new and looking to recreate something slightly different. And I'm sure what Ted said there around culture change, you know, from the BBC to the MOJ, it's quite a different kettle of fish, isn't it? But yeah, so really exciting. Thank you, everyone, for a great session. And I think we're going to go to a very short break before we have our session on policy, which is, I'm looking forward to that one.